Hello once again everyone, and welcome back to Nitty Gritty. We're on episode 3 now, and I'm going to use today to briefly talk about handwork. Now, as you can see, I've got my first prop of the series. When I mean handwork, what I'm really talking about is nothing too specific. We're not talking about grip transitions or launching into strikes or anything like that yet. More just how I grip various weapons, which is why I've gone for the most non-specific weapon I could, as well as the powering from basically the elbow down. Because last time we kind of talked about knee up, shoulder slash bicep back, and now we're going to talk about elbow down. So first off, let's talk about how I grip things. Now, firstly, it's a good note to kind of mention when I grip a sword, I actually grip it in the exact same way that I grip a jacket when I wrestle. And this is something that I think I was doing before, but it certainly is now linked to it with me. So if you don't know, if you've never done any sort of wrestling or, well, any sort of jacketed wrestling, especially something like judo, wherein the gi is very important, you never want to try and grab with your top two fingers. Too weak, things will get entwined, it's not so great. The way you want to grab is you get your pinky finger, then your ring finger, and you roll things into your hand. What this does is, as you can see, I'm making more of a slightly diagonal line with my grip as opposed to in front like a fist. This cinches everything in a bit like I'm holding a rope and makes it a lot harder for something to be tugged out of your hand. This same principle of kind of the strength coming from the pinky and ring finger is something that is touched upon in many different sword systems and is one that I advocate you use. So when I grip, what I'm looking to do is I put my hand behind the sword, as we talked about before, and it's that pinky, ring, middle, and then finally index, cinching things down into the palm of my hand, so it's now just part of it. Now, that's not to say that my index and thumb aren't doing anything, but the more it becomes part of my hand by pushing into this part of my palm, the more control over it I have, and the more my arm and wrist will get tired, my fingers don't get tired. My hand pretty much never cramps anymore, honestly. So, same exact thing on the other side, just cinching. This ensures that I have a nice firm grip, regardless of what kind of grip I'm taking. Even in a situation like if I'm using a backsword or something where it does force me to have a bit more of a kind of hammer fist style grip, that pinky and ring finger are still doing the majority of the job. So like right there, the reason the tip's going to go forward is because I'm squeezing with those fingers, not by pushing with the top of my hand. Though once I start combining those motions, you can get quite a bit. But either way, I digress. So, I'm cinching my hand in, nothing too complicated. Now, along with this is, once you've got that grip well cinched in, how should it be lining up with your arm? So, ignoring all the stuff not ignoring, but building off the stuff we talked about last time, when it comes to striking, how should I be aligned? So if you'll notice right now, my hand is on top of the stick, leading to my forearm being on top of the stick, meaning this is all lined up directly with my shoulder. Regardless of what plane I swing in or how I swing, it is basically just part of my arm. One of the things I see happen the most, and we'll get back to this again in a second with the second hand, is the grip will start to rotate, and you'll start to hold it more to the side. Now, that's not to say that you can't still do some good work here, but in general, holding it more to the side means that now you're having to kind of fight against it slipping in and out of your hand, versus if you're well on top, you've got no problems. It's where you need it to be. Now with the other hand, we get the same sort of thing. So now we're going to start talking about two-handed weapons. Here, probably the biggest mistake that I see is the hand starting to drift sideways, basically the grips being uneven like this. This means that you have to always transition to get a good cut, or more often, you end up just using your dominant hand and this guy isn't doing anything. Right? What we want to avoid having happen, just like we talked about last time, is we want both arms to be doing their job, not one arm to be doing its job and the other to be a useless training wheel. Because when I extend like this, if both arms are behind the weapon and doing their job, both extend and bring it to my center, making that really strong triangle shape. If one arm is not doing its job, Now it's back here, the triangle is weak on one side, and I find when the rubber meets the road and this starts hitting resistance, this will start turning upward. Your arm is bent, now we've got this sort of thing happening. This is not desirable because now the only way for you to exert force is to start straining even harder with your arm, and that's where I think a lot of people get arm pain early on, besides abusing the thumb grip, but we'll get back to that later. So, both hands behind, cinch grip, push, and everything's going to be going where it needs to go. Even with a longer grip, in this case, all I need to worry about is just turning my body a little bit more because now getting both arms across. I've talked about that before. Okay, so nothing too complicated here. Let's talk a little bit about, what if you're worried more about thrusting? Does your hand still have to be on top? I do still advocate for it to be so. So, in my case, when I use my rapier, and even to be fair, when I use a small sword, the way it works is I put, again, that sort of cinch grip, I put 2 fingers over the ricasso, so I'm basically standing kind of, Spock-like, but that thumb is up near the forte, pressing with a pinch grip as well. Now, this means that I have a little bit more point control, and you can do the exact same thing if you're cutting by putting your dominant thumb on the back, but that pinch grip now allows me to have just a little bit more tip liveliness, etc. So, do things change a whole lot? Not really, just my thumb has migrated from here to here, thus allowing me to more accurately turn my hand over and thus direct energy. So nothing complicated. Let's talk about some weirder grips though. So let's talk about things like thumb to thumb or, thumbs back, etc. So this isn't necessarily something you come across a whole lot with swords, unless we're talking about half swording, but it does matter. And even then with half swording, most people don't really think about it because they don't strike, they thrust. So, when it comes to using thumb to thumb, when it comes to striking, right, and thus hitting with this end, or this end, the big thing you've got to watch out for is getting what's called a boxer's fracture. That's wherein your wrist is not straight when it receives a great amount of force, thus leading to it hurting you. Now, there are 2 ways around this. Option number 1 is to release the stick, or staff, or spear, or axe, or whatever you're swinging at a person in that given time, right, younger sibling. Release it with your pinky, ring, and pinky, ring, and middle finger, keeping your index and thumb in grip. This ensures that it can extend. Even if I receive a great amount of force, it's not actually going back into my wrist, but that's not enough. Because I'm going to release, I go ahead and start bringing this inward, thus ensuring that I get a little bit more bang for my buck since I'm essentially letting go. So, show that motion again. And this same thing can be applied when you're thrusting as well, right? For example, you need to get a little bit more reach than you can normally, so I relax just a little bit. I do this often when it comes to using the half sword in a longer grip. So I just open the pinky and just kind of let it slide on top, still keeping my index and thumb where it is in a nice pinch grip. Not really much of a problem. And on the strike, same exact thing. Now, the other way around it is to do the exact opposite, i.e. keep your wrist straight, but get a lot closer to target. So, in this case, what I'm going to do is, I don't want to be gripping terribly hard, but I want to change the way that I'm throwing my strike. This is especially important in regards to moving through closing actions, such as striking someone with the pommel from a half sword grip, or if you're looking to use this in a throwing action. So most of the throws that people think of with pommel, they think about the collar throw, going backward. But you can also do a reach from the outside going forward. And so this one kind of matters for that a little bit more. So essentially, just like if I were going to strike somebody, rather than striking with my fist, because eventually if I think about having to hit with this end, that just doesn't work. My wrist will start bending to let the tip come out. The other way around that is to get closer to the person, but I'm still not applying the same force. So, the way I like to think about this is it's almost like I'm throwing an elbow. Now, it's not a great elbow, mind you, it's a kind of weird elbow, but the point being, when I throw this strike, rather than trying to reach with my hand, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push with my elbow and my shoulder, thus ensuring that I will hit closer to me than I normally want to, but my wrist will be straight right behind that strike. Here's that from the side. So, same idea. Nice and strong. My other hand, however, does not want to suck up because if it does that, that starts to manipulate the tip, I want to keep that in equal pressure on both sides. So that's kind of the opposite way of doing so. Now, there's really not a ton else to talk about in regards to wrist position or particular hand position there, but I will leave off with the idea of how do you switch between them, etc., and some basic things you can do to start working on that. First off is start really settling your hand when you pick up a sword. What I mean by that, or a stick or whatever, don't just grab it, right? Think for a minute about what you're about to do, right? Get your hands lined up the way you want to. Get it seated well, and play around with different configurations of grip and see how that's, handling. One of the things I actually do is I pick up a sword and I hold it in the most incorrect way I can. And the reason I do that is because then I think to myself, oh, okay, this might be causing some problems. If I'm holding, if I've got my left hand sideways when I'm trying to fight like this, okay, that's not activating the way I want to. That might be causing some problems that I'm seeing in people who might be doing that. Here's why, here's how we can address it, right? And we'll start allowing you to identify things, not just in yourself, but in others. And in regards to others, they can be for help, or if you're fighting them in tournament, to destroy them, right? Because that's what we're all about, pure adversary and all that. Now, the other thing I would say is play around with modifications of the grips. Once you've got a nice baseline for whatever you like, start thinking about how those things can transition. So for example, I've got my hand behind. Now I can practice contracting and releasing the fingers to get some engagement going. I can practice turning my wrist over to get some engagement going. I can practice hinging from the elbow, and then I can practice rolling from the shoulder, and then finally I can start working on all three in regards to extension or contraction. But either way, that's kind of my nitty-gritty for you today. Like I said, I wanted to keep it not too specific and also go over things a little bit more varied than we have. Hopefully that's of help. If anyone has any questions about this, feel free to ask. And hopefully the new mic that I have attached to the phone makes my sound nice and clear, but we shall see. Otherwise though, thank you very, very much for watching, and we will go over some other techniques another time.